So next we're going to be learning how to do tints and shades. So a tint is a colour that you add white into it to create a lighter tone. A shade is a colour that you add black into it to create a darker tone. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to paint these 4 shapes. So the first shape, you can choose any colour. Now this is the main colour that you are going to be using for the whole of this worksheet. So I'm going to be choosing this blue. So it's quite a bright blue, and I'm going to aim to stay within the lines and colour that whole shape in. Now because you're using watercolour, watercolour isn't really designed to go too smooth, so don't worry if it looks a little bit patchy. As long as you mix it up nice and thickly, you're going to get a really nice vibrant colour. So you can use any of the other colours, perhaps not the yellows, because they might just be a little bit too bright for what we are doing. Now it's easier again if you turn your work upside down, but I need to video this palette so you can see what I'm mixing, so it's a little bit more difficult for me to turn my work upside down, but you guys can have a little bit more space and to turn it up the other way. So don't add too much water. You don't want to rub holes in your paper, which can happen if you're scrubbing at the paper a little bit too much. So as I said, don't worry about the texture, just get a really nice bright colour on there. So next I'm just using a water pot just to wash the brush. So don't worry if the brush is stained, the pigment does go into the brush at times. So next, this next circle, it says I need to do a shade. So that means I take the same blue. Now I'm going to use the lid of the paint to mix on. Now if you want to use a kitchen plate or a tile like we do at school, that's okay. So I'm going to put some blue out onto the mixing tile. Now it's really important that you get your brush clean. Okay, you don't want to contaminate your colours here. So next I'm going to pick up some black. I'm just going to activate it by going backwards and forwards. Now you don't want to be splaying your brush out like this, because that is going to damage your brush. So left to right, nice and gently, you're going to preserve your brush. Now just put that little bit of black to the side, and then you're just going to use a little bit of it just to mix that slightly darker blue. Now if you feel like it's gone a bit too black, you can go back in, pick up a little bit more blue, and that is the colour that you are going to use. So when you put it on, you should notice it's a slightly dull colour now. It's slightly darker and slightly desaturated because the black makes it not quite as bright. So again, I would highly advise turning your work upside down. Okay. Now you're going to need to develop your brush control skills. So keeping your brush upright if you need to get a nice crisp edge. And again, we're not worried too much about that texture. We are just creating a shade. So you would use this colour in a shadow. And then we're just going to go back to the blue. So I'm going to start mixing up the blue on the palette again. Now you can need to clean your water out at this point. Now I've got a second water that I'm just using for white. So I need to mix my white up. I need quite a lot of white, I would imagine. So I'm going to make that nice and thick and just pop it on the palette. Now I'm just going to pick up a tiny little bit of blue, so I'm not using too much blue, just a little bit. Now I don't think, looking at that, that is enough to paint that whole circle. So I'm going to go back to the white. So I've got a clean brush. I'm just going to put a little bit more paint out. And a little bit more blue. And here I'm going to have a tint. So this is what you will use for a highlight. So the paint is still relatively thick. It may not look it, but it is. So it's not watery. It's going to give you a nice coat. Now, as you can see here, these colours have dried a little bit smoother than they looked at the beginning. So don't worry about them looking textured. Okay, if you've got different paints like acrylic paints or thicker paints, then you will be able to get it to look smooth, but watercolour paints are not really designed to be done too thick because they are a little bit transparent, so you're not going to get it smooth. So I might be able to blend that a little bit more in a minute. Okay, now this next one, we're going to give you a bit of a challenge. So here you could almost create what we did on the front cover with the harmonious colours into this sphere. So I'm going to not use blue now, I'm going to choose a different colour. So I'm going to go in with my red, and again I'm trying not to damage my brush. So I'm not scrubbing it around too much. I'm going to put some red out on here. Now this is going to be kind of like a medium tone. Okay, now think about how am I going to create a dark tone when I'm using red? Okay, so I'm going to add black. So I'm going to get some more red out. Cleaning my brush again. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of black again. I am not going to need too much to make that into a dark red. And I'm going to just add another layer on. So imagine I am painting a football or a globe. Now, if you wanted it kind of extreme, you can use a lot of black just for the bottom of that sphere. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the red to make the final colour. So again, I'm just going to clean my white slightly because it's gone a little bit on the blue side. So I'm going to be picking up as much white as I can. I'm going to try not to get it dirty by washing the brush. Pick up some more white, and that is going to become my tint. So again, you can do this with any colour. So to create a bit more of an equal fade, I'm going to start adding a little bit more of the pinky red. Just to start blending these colours together. I'm might put a little bit of the pure colour, so the hue. So this is just red directly out the palette. And I'm just going to mix up a little bit of the dark red just to go on the bottom. So try not to let your paper get too wet because it goes bumpy and it's difficult to paint. So the final step, I just clean my brush. I'm going to get rid of the excess water. So you could use some tissue, but you can use that, and then we can just use that dry brush just to blend in those highlights a little bit. Again, you can wash your brush out as many times as you need to. But again, don't scrub the paper too hard because this is very thin paper. Final section, I'm going to be doing my self-assessment. So I can identify a hue. So this is this box here. So I can pick a colour out of my paints, which I can. I can identify a tint. So I can look at that and know that that is a tint of blue because I can see the white and the blue. I can mix a shade of colour. So I can add black to my colour. Okay, and I can paint a tonal sphere. Now, if you need to look up on the internet what a tonal sphere looks like, if you haven't got your sketchbook, you've probably got one of these in your sketchbook when we did it in pencil. Okay, but that's fine if you need to look it up. So finally, my EBI. I probably need to improve my brush control. Okay, so date at the top, and we're going to underline that, and that is ready for your assessment in lesson. Now I would say when you leave your paints, you should wash this lid out so it's nice and clean for the next time, and if you've messed any of these up, then you can just get a little bit of tissue and just dry it. You shouldn't leave them too wet because they can go mouldy over time. Okay, so you can keep your brush in the side of here, and then you can put your lid back on. It is best to dry them out before you put the lid on. That will stop it from going mouldy inside.